Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, your paranormal portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by the supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together. Hello, hello. Welcome to #Liberty Night 4. This is the episode where we really start getting a little bit into the battles that really start shifting this whole war. People are starting to shift into their positions and what they're playing in whatever their environment is. Are they in town? Are they out in, the rural outskirts of this? How is the war affecting them? Are they, shopkeepers, or have they shifted what they were during the day in their normal life? By now, people are, spinning their own wool, making that good New England wool, shearing sheep and learning how to dye that wool. They're not buying things from Britain, and they can't get supplies from Spain and France, right? So people are really starting to come into their own and seeing who they are. Like that saying that says hard times make, strong men and women, and, the thing. So there you go. So tonight, the episode of Liberty, the 1997 documentary that we're watching for our summer event. I hope you're watching it with me. I know that Froze is watching it and a couple other people. We have the link to the free show. Let's see if I put it up here. Put it in the chat. I know we're kind of starting a little early. That's okay. All right, I think I got it. All right, let me see if I get it in the chat. So this is it. We are on episode 4. I have word from Bowden and from Lynn, and Lynn should be here on our next episode, which will be 5. And she can tell us all about it and get us caught up. Like, what did she see in this? What stuck out to her? Hey, D-Rock, welcome in, sweetie. Hey, baby. Welcome. So if you're watching it along with us, we are up to 4. You can zoom ahead if you can't, hold back. That's fine. What I'm most interested in now, if you are watching it with us or you're watching it along as we do these episodes, what has been a surprise to you? Did you find out that George Washington was a little bit deeper of a human being, the way he thought and the reasons he did certain things? Did you maybe Ben Franklin, maybe Sam Adams is your guy, maybe John Adams, right? Maybe Abigail Adams, the way she stood up and stayed behind and started creating these little circles of, hey, Uncommon, welcome in, these circles and groups to try to help and support, which was so important. People say that George Washington, when his wife, Martha Washington, who he called Patsy, would come and visit wherever he was, wherever their encampment was at the time, she would go through and see the needs of the soldiers and the needs of the camp followers, the wives and the families and the kids, what they needed. And, when she went back, she would try to get those things and find ways to create enough supply of whatever it was. Socks was a big thing. Shoes, they didn't have shoes. We heard all about Valley Forge and the footprints with the bloody footprints in the snow, for Pete's sakes, and we're complaining you can't get toilet paper. You know what I mean? And we've all seen hard times over the past couple of years, and again, that's why I'm doing this, because there's so many parallels. And every single time we load another episode on a Sunday night, here it comes. I mean, we're doing them in succession, and darned if they don't overlap somehow with what's going on today in one way or another. Now, 2 weeks ago, it was a shot heard around the world, Lexington and Concord, and the very same time, we were definitely going through something just like that, and I forget what last week was. I think it was, it wasn't Blows Must Decide. It was something else, but it just seems to have this overlap. And tonight the overlap is France. Cheeky little monkeys that they are. And we've been getting a lot of extra France in our face, whether you asked for it or not, by turning on the dial and watching the Olympics. So if you can watch that, and listen, I'm no prude, but when you have a guy served on a silver platter with a bunch of flowers that symbolize deflowering, and the Last Supper portrayed the direct opposite of, boy, and then the lights went out. Wow, that was wild. Does anybody know how long they were out? That was nuts. So, if you're not convinced by the Grammys and the Oscars and any kind of musical whatever award, if you're not convinced by CERN and the ceremonies there, or the 2020 Olympics when they had the nurses and the incubators and the people in stretchers, and where they hauling body bags and all this other stuff with the big Grim Reaper in the middle. So what was it in France? Wow. And I would pay close attention to the horse, who was very pale and gray in color and riding on the water. What's that all about? The bull, that was great. That looked a lot like the one in the airport that's somewhere in Colorado. And that airport there, with the big, what is that? Lucifer fell over, the big horse with the red eyes and the red that comes out of it, flashes red like fire it's full of fire internally or whatever. They had a bull like that there last night. They had all this like symbolism of blood covering a French Revolution of some sort. And Marie Antoinette talking head, that was kind of wild. I have to admit that part was kind of cool. But the just said great right away. Come on, I'm not alone. Everybody who saw that, raise hand. The second you saw that, I didn't understand a damn word she was saying because, of course, it was French. But the minute I saw it, I said, "Great Halloween costume!" right out the gate. But then it went down. It went down here from there. But anyhow, so what's our connection to France? Well, like I said, watching that, if you're not convinced, and then seeing the Statue of Liberty at the end, all bruised and like the end of Planet of the Apes or whatever. And no, I didn't watch it. This is just the amount of clips. And now they're starting to pull the clips off of social media and off of YouTube and things like that. And they've come out and they've apologized, and they tried to tell us that we didn't see, balls and just all kind of things. And now everybody's coming out doing the heart. They're trying to take the heart now. So, it's Full Tilt Boogie, guys. And again, I hope watching this series is giving you some ideas of what's going on. I mean, I was watching this series and I heard a guy say the dollar went to nothing. When you went into town, a loaf of bread would be this much or something. And this was the colonial times they're talking about. And you could hear the shopkeeper saying, silver or gold, we won't take paper money, because it was all that shifting going around. Like states had their own, the colonies had their own currency and stuff. And there was a lot of hubbub going on. And then the whole thing with the boycott with Britain and the tea going in the harbor. And, things are all just disheveled, right? Because now, Ben Franklin is trying very hard to get France to come over and help us. Like, hey, you don't want England, getting all uppity. He's trying every angle he can. They get uppity, they might come over and finish the job on you. They had embarrassed France. They'd, beaten them badly. It's all about face and money and power, and it still is. But I can't look at that and say, we talked about this before, looking at both sides with an honest, as much of the information as we have to go on. We weren't there. Right, history, and those who write history. Well, I think we're a little smarter than that to get caught up in lies. We're really good at going through and discerning, but we really only have so much to work with. And then you can kind of look at it and go, were they that bad or were they worse? We have to go through all that, but we're used to that in the paranormal. We have to discern all of these ghost stories, all of these Bigfoot sightings, all of these UFO abductions. This should be just, easy peasy at this point to sort this crap that's going on around us. Right? I know rituals when I see them. I know black magic when I see it. I know good things when I see them too. Just like I said, when I saw that in Butler County, when the shots rang out, normally you see people running and running and running. And you saw a little of that, but they stopped and they turned around and they looked back. And they ran up to the fence and they looked and they gripped. They had to see what was happening, right? And those close to the stage moved closer to the stage. They didn't run away. Now, there was some in the stands moving and helping people and doing things around. It wasn't the same thing. It was the hand of God. It was a calmness and a light on that crowd at that moment. It's a different kind of people. It was people that had been through a lot, that had gone against evil and chose the right way, the hardest way to fight back, to do what was right, to keep your moral compass, to try to be that like in the old westerns, the white hats against the black hats, you know. How frustrating that is, you know, when the sheriff on his white horse and his white chaps and his big old white Stetson, and he's following all the rules, and old Black Bart's getting away with all kind of stuff and blowing things up with dynamite and running off with the girl and kidnapping this one and, you know, kicking a dog here. And you go, Marshall, why don't you do something? And eventually at the very end, he winds up getting the girl and getting Black Bart all tied up in rope and thrown in the jailhouse and, you know, saving the town. It's the way it's supposed to work out. That's what we're going through in a kind of a bigger scale, of course. And it's very frustrating. But when you can look at moments like that and you can see the good and you can see the light and you can pull it out without even trying, it's right there. That's your ray of hope. That's what you hang on to when it's darkest. And you go, I know it's there. I know that light's there. I've seen it. I've felt it. And that's what gets you through, got you to this point. And that's what got these people through too. It's exactly what did it. Hope. Something bigger than themselves. You know, we get desensitized and we think about all these people, you know, okay, the Battle of Yorktown, you know, how many people passed, you know, 53,000 in Gettysburg in 3 days, you know, just rattling off numbers and numbers and numbers and everything. How much does it take? And then we'll watch one little girl fall down a well and we're all glued to the TV for a day and a half. We're a funny people. And we're very malleable emotionally. When you see something like you saw in France, you have to look at it and go, okay, what can I discern from this? What's going on? Where are we at? And how can I help? Where can I stand? And you start from there. You don't let it overwhelm you. We know what's going on. Spiritual warfare. We've also seen the good. And I think that's what was happening too. In 1776, 1778, earlier, 1763, all of that. Because it wasn't just a stamp that pushed people over. It wasn't just a tax that pushed people over. It was the last straw that pushed everybody to move together in one way. And then you had all your little groups out there, and we said, oh gosh, that's the hardest thing. That was Samuel Adams's his dilemma. How do I motivate? How do I push that emotional button? How do I get people riled up without getting them so riled up they're killing each other in the streets? I hate rioting. I hate this tar and feathering. I hate this. But if you get rid of the tax man, he can't collect the taxes. If you stop the stamp man from distributing, or the tea man from distributing whatever, we don't, everything was, how do you deal with an idea and a tyranny that's coming from across the great ocean that takes 6 weeks one way minimum. That's if everything goes well, right? You can't see that person. You can't deal with it. It's all words. It's words that you're hearing back from other people that can read and they've got that information. And you might be getting it 2 weeks after the fact or longer. Right? So you act emotionally to what's in front of you. People, other people, something physical you can put your hand on. The tax man, the loyalist in town that still wants to live under the king. I'll pay the taxes. Sure, no problem. Everything's fine with me. I'm not having a problem. I don't know what you're so upset about. Well, I'm upset about things that you should be upset about, but they're not affecting you. you have more money, or you're not, your kids aren't affected by it. It's exactly what we're going through now. People are going to only react to what affects them. If it's the grocery store prices or the gas prices, the tax on the bridge fee went up. Well, I go through that bridge I don't know how many times a week, right? So you're going to be affected by that. Your kids going to school. They walk into a library and they've got, see Dick and Jane do things that you never thought you'd see Dick and Jane do in kindergarten. So those parents go in there and they go through what they think should be easy because it makes so much common sense and so much moral sense. It was never, what are you thinking? And then they hit a wall and they have to fight harder, and it's an unexpected fight because the things that we thought were in place to stop these things from happening were corrupted a long time ago. We just didn't notice. It didn't affect us. We didn't push back because it's all these little things. And that's what Sam Adams was dealing with. How do I get all the shopkeepers who want to colonize and be a United States out from underneath the king? How do I get all those people together? Well, we have to have meetings. We have to meet at the tavern. Well, that's not working out too good because they're getting drunk and we're not getting anything done. So what do? We meet under the big elm tree in the corner square, and everybody got together and they found out, wow, we've got a lot in common. I don't like my kids, reading, Dick, Dick and Dick, C-Spot Run, So maybe we should all get together and see if we could stop that. And we don't want to pay taxes and these stamp taxes because it's adding up for me. I have to buy all the cards for my saloon, and I have to buy, I have to pay so much on the other stuff and the paper products and printing, advertisement, and all these other things every time you touch paper. So playing cards and posters and these broadsides that they used to put up, their form of advertisement or getting out the news, all of it, writing paper, everything was writing. Fold it up, you write it, you put the powder on it to dry the ink, and then you fold it over and you seal it with wax and you send it off. That's how everybody communicated. They hadn't moved up to the 2 cans and a string yet. It was all written down. So paper, that was a big tax. And if you want to see what a last straw kind of looks like, I thought this would be interesting. Welcome in, everybody. Please hit the like on the way out, and if you share it out, I know there's some people over at Steve's. He said he was going to send some people over here. I don't know if he's done, if his show's done yet. So I'm going to go ahead and show this. Please hit the like. I appreciate it. Let's see. This, my friends, is what a last straw looks like. This tiny little thing. Now, do you think this is actually what started the revolution 1776, or do you think it was a little bit more? Was it an idea? Because an idea you can't kill. See, that's what the British didn't understand. And that's what the people who put on that show, showing the Statue of Liberty all damaged, New York flattened, balloons flying above, white horses galloping. They don't understand that we know that it's more. It's an idea. It's a freedom. And you can't kill that. So it's not just a tax. But here's what the last straw looks like.
It's hard to believe that this little blue piece of paper, less than 2 inches on
Figures you try to get that in there. Sorry about
each
the ads.
side, tore apart an empire. But in a way, that's what happened. Now, the Stamp Act of 1765 caused one of the first really significant rifts with Great Britain. The Stamp Act was literally a tax on paper. It was a pretty extensive coverage of types of paper that were taxed by the American stamp tax. So land transactions, court documents, newspapers, playing cards, what have you.
The British used two main types of stamps for the American stamp tax. One was an embossed stamp, like this one, meaning that a pattern was pressed into the paper and it has a texture or a kind of elevated pattern.
And the other is an ink stamp, kind of like today's rubber stamps where you have an ink pad and you stamp a pattern into it and then they stamp the ink right on the page of paper. In 1765, the British imposed the American Stamp Act. And you can see this is one of those American Stamp Act stamps because it says America in a ribbon across the top above this crown.
It also has the amount that this particular stamp cost, 2 shillings 6 pence.
The Americans objected to this stamp because because of the type of taxation or the way the stamp looked or anything like that. They objected because Parliament had adopted that Stamp Act and the Americans had no representation in Parliament. So they called the Stamp Act taxation without representation.
Well, there you go. So now when people tell you a little stamp, okay, a little tax made a third of the people go right over the edge. It did. But it was the idea. It was the idea of the big foot coming down. Welcome in, Vixen. Welcome in. The big foot coming down on your back and oppressing and telling you no, 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 no. Here's the thing. There are too many people in this revolution going back and going back and going back. I don't care if you're on the Oregon Trail or in the gold rush or the breaking into the great wilderness or tribal indigenous people trying to fight to hold on to a little bit they could hold on to and moving and trying to appease and like what do these people want? They just keep coming and more and more and more of them, and they lied. It's two-faced. We had to make up words for things we had no relevance to certain tribes, like lying and being two-faced and saying one thing to your face and going and doing another. Honor was meant a lot to many of the tribes. I'm going to say all. You can't paint them all with a broad brush, but you can say that against anybody globally. It's the people. People are different. People are different than their governments. People are different than the actions of their government. There's most people, when you get down to these, just regular, Dick and Janes, regular Dick and Janes, whatever that may be. They just want to be left alone. They want to go to work. They want to pay their bills. They want to love their kids. They want their kids to be safe. They want their people to be safe. They want good health care. They want food. They don't want to be lied to about it. They don't want poison in their food. They don't want groups telling them, hey, we're in charge of making sure your food is good. We're going to put a seal on that. And when you see that seal, you know it's safe for you. It's safe for you and your family, your dog, your cat, your horse, your car, whatever. And you trust it because you're not supposed to put it in writing unless it's true. Well, it's BS. They lie to you on the news. They lie to you in the paper. They lie to you on labels. They lie to you in the offices, whether it's an insurance or a doctor or a lawyer, an Indian chief. And that's where it starts separating. The dark, the light, and everything in between. And people are starting to separate and move further. And those groups are getting bigger on both ends. And that middle is getting a little thinner because people kind of see where everything is. And I think they did here too. And they knew it was that time. If they didn't strike then, many a man on that front line or woman taking over the cannon or bringing water to keep the barrels on the cannons cool, whatever their job was, nurse or helping or whatever. Each person thought if we don't do it now, we'll be fighting, our great-grandchildren will be fighting these people. I think there's so many groups that fight like that and realize if we give it up, we're going to be overrun, and that's it. The struggle will be that much worse. So you cannot give in. You cannot give up. You cannot stop. You cannot lose hope. You cannot stagger. You cannot fall. If you do, you get up. And that's what these people did. And they said no more. And they fought, pushed back. Pushers get pushed. When stuff's pushed in your face, sometimes you get it flying right back at you. You know? So don't lose hope. Okay, so one of these guys that I think gets a bum rap, because a lot of people like to throw quotes at me from other generals and other people, you know, like I said, I'm no military expert. I'm no expert of any kind. But I have an opinion, and I love characters. I love seeing characters grow. I like getting it from them if I can, you know, if it's letters or a journal or it's something like that, a diary, whatever. As close to the intimate persona as you can get. You can read a lot of books on opinions of authors that write on Abraham Lincoln or whatever, but unless you dig all around and you get a lot of different opinions, and then you can get to the person, the man or the woman who's writing and say, you know, writing the journal or you know, giving the quotes originally and where that quote came from, what inspired it. You know, like Patrick Henry or the wonderful Thomas Paine. You really don't, it's so interesting to watch those characters develop, if you can. George Washington is one of them. Sure, he showed up in his uniform at the First Continental Congress. What did you want him to wear? Right? That was his thing. That was his deal. Was it arrogant to do that? Who knows? Was it grandiose? Was it too much? Was it he was sitting there just hoping they'd give it to him? Was he really? Or was he there because he was interested in a cause? He was there showing what he had to show for his time, his journey so far on this earth. Okay. He was an officer fighting for the British in the French and Indian War in 1812, right? He didn't do so good. He didn't have some great battles. He didn't have a great battle history as far as a winning leader. He was just getting started as a kid. And sometimes that those things can't be taught. They have to be learned. Well, here's the thing. He had the gumption and the intestinal fortitude to forge forward through that. He leaned into that torpedo, honey. He didn't give up and go, you know, I don't have such a good reputation in the military. I'm going up some big wigs in here. We have delegates from all these different colonies, and they're all businessmen or planters or rich, this, that, and the other thing. George wasn't doing too bad. Yeah, he married into money, but he wasn't doing too bad. He brought a lot to that union. They both knew what they were doing, and they really liked each other. And like I said, the most thing in between them, their passion for each other was a mutual respect and the love of fashion, decorating, and everything that's new and proper. Forever trying to achieve that notoriety from Britain. But then I think it moved to notoriety. It very slowly started to go to the notoriety of each other within the colonies. And other visiting dignitaries from France, which we know, you know, Lafayette, great rapport and friendship made with George Washington, with good old the Marquis de Lafayette. Wonderful 19-year-old kid that probably helped us get a country because he believed in what? Not outrageous Stamp Act, an idea. That's what drove Lafayette. He was so on fire for it. He went back to France and he would just, you don't understand these people. They are just hacking it out of the wilderness without a buy or leave to anyone. They if they want something, they get together and they say, you know, well, I know how to plant corn, and well, I know how to make how to make the cornmeal, and I know how to do this, and blacksmithing is being born, and all these different things, really, really expanding their knowledge and creativity. And it's amazing to watch it grow. And he was so inspired by it. And if he hadn't constantly kept going back to France and kind of softened them up, Ben Franklin is now going there to see if they'll come and help us. And right now, the king's not receiving him because he just got bawled out in Parliament. Remember, for the letters? You man of letters. Because that was a cheeky monkey thing to say to him, because they always said he was a man of letters because he was constantly writing the Poor Richard's Almanac or the Silence Dogood letters. And this really effete, pompous kind of a parliamentarian came out and just added that into his bawling out of Ben Franklin, who was standing there in his velvet suit and never said a word, just stood there, staunch character. And he called him, you man of letters, and kind of with that last little bit stripping Ben Franklin of his face, of what he had, what he went with him as far as how he could stand in front of Parliament. And this is who I am. And that's what George Washington did when he showed up in his uniform. I don't think it was arrogant. I don't think it was any of that. If anything, George Washington really wasn't very arrogant. He was very modest. And he was constantly trying to put forward that the mannerisms of what he thought a gentleman would be. He was constantly trying to achieve that. And I think that comes from his younger days as being the oldest in of quite a few kids. And that's all scrambled and crazy. But his mom was very domineering. And he was constantly trying to move through that. And she demanded a lot of him. And I think he was constantly trying to get that back. And maybe Martha took a place on that too. It's like, but they really had a mutual kind of respect. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen, got a chance to see Mount Vernon. Has anybody here ever gotten to see? Vixen, have you been? Has anybody here been to the beautiful, beautiful Virginia? And you hear how much he loved, George Washington loved Mount Vernon and how beautiful it was and just the majesty of it. And I think that Mount Vernon and its views and how he felt when he was there and receiving so many people, and those people coming and, of course, giving compliments on the beautiful home that he and Martha had. They were very social. I think the only one that probably topped him was Dolly Madison, but at the White House. But this was a big deal. The dance card and the dancing and the music and the socializing. And I think at one point in time, George Washington said that I think everybody who comes through Virginia stops here before they leave. It was really that big. Yes, Mount Vernon is wonderful. Yes, see, you've been. Hello, John. How you doing? Welcome in. So, all right. So this is what I thought I did, so look, I've got a couple of connections, right, with a few mediums, right, some really good ones. And I said, look, my chat's been so cool. And we're doing this summer event. We're doing kind of like a book of the month club. We're watching this documentary. It's in 6 parts. And, one of the characters, of course, that looms prominence over the whole thing is George Washington. And, nobody could give, isn't it a shame that we couldn't walk through Mount Vernon with George now? We kind of missed out. And I thought, can I pull a favor and see if one of you guys could maybe contact George? I'm pretty sure by now he's got a lot of his stuff done. Maybe he's really busy, but if he could pop down here, maybe give us a tour, that would be cool. My chat's been really good and they really deserve it. Guess what happened? We got him. Let's go on a tour.
A good day. I have understood that you had some curiosity about the house, and I'm very pleased to be able to answer questions for you. This is where I begin every day, although I will tell you that it is not common for us to have guests here. My wife and I, when we'd been married some 13 years, we decided that we wanted to have our own bedchamber that was somewhat separate from the rest of the house, and so I added an extension upon the house to the south part, and this and the study below were the result. Every day I begin here, and I am not dressed in what I currently am, but I shall not be exposing myself to any criticism in that nature right now. And as my wife will stay up here for some time and begin some of her meditations for the day, and also will take some time in what is considered her office here. But then I shall head down the stairs. Something I must warn you about. I have quite a bit of difficulty when I pass through these stairs. I almost always have to duck to avoid hitting my head, and if I do not remind myself to do so, it takes great effort not to let oaths fall from my mouth. But as you can see, while the house has been built to my every desire, sometimes things fall a bit short. And now we are entering my study, or my sanctuary. As I said before, after my wife and I were married some 13 years, we decided we needed a bit more privacy. We had many guests even then. And we built the bedchamber above and my study here below. Every morning when I rise, I come down the stairs, come right through this door where I change into my clothes for the day, and then I begin the work of my correspondence, which is voluminous. It seems that letters come from all corners of the globe, and I am constantly needing to continue to write. But in here, in my private area, I keep my books, which I've collected over the many years, and I keep some other mementos that I think are important to keep close to me, including that of my brother, Lawrence. My eldest brother, who was my very dear friend as well, and I don't think that anyone could ask for a better brother than what I had in Lawrence. When I was but 11 years old, my father passed away, and Lawrence very much so stepped into the breach that was left by him. I owe a great deal to him. Also, of course, I'm surrounded by other things, busts of Captain Jones, this fan chair, which seems to get a great deal of curiosity from some people, was one I purchased in Philadelphia. It does an adequate job of keeping one cool, although one does get their exercise in their feet at the same time. But let me take you on to the dining area. I think you'll find that more public areas of the home are perhaps more social and to your liking. After the business of the day, the correspondence and anything else that needs attention is taken care of in the study. Then we will come here for our breakfast. My wife usually sees to it that I have something good before me, quite often a large stack of corn pancakes covered with honey and butter, very much to my liking. You may note the color of the room. I've been told many times that green is excellent for the digestion. And in this case, it is a verdigris green that well, it's not easy to acquire, and it takes quite a bit of maintenance, but I'm quite pleased with the appearance of it. I hope you find it to your liking as well. This room has some very happy memories in it, and some not as happy, but I will leave that for another time. Perhaps you would like to join me in the entryway. The staircase here, while it is very attractive, has the unfortunate effect of making it so that my windows from the west front are not as symmetrical as I would like. It was a compromise that I had to make while designing the house and enlarging it. We are now in the entryway, and that is the domain of our butler, Frank.
Here at Mount Vernon, my main duties are to supervise the other slaves working in this household and to greet all the guests that come through this door here. And if there is time, I'll even take them to meet the general.
And if the house is running properly, I always know that is because of the great efforts of Frank. This over here might be of some interest to you. This is the key to the Bastille. This was a gift from the Marquis de Lafayette. When the Bastille fell, he saw to it that the key was packed and shipped to me. It passed through quite few hands before it came to here, to Mount Vernon. Below it is a picture of that fortress that he considered to be a fortress of tyranny. And so the symbol of the destroyed Bastille and the key that is left, he now says, is a symbol of liberty and the end of tyranny. May it ever be so. But perhaps you might like to see the formal parlor. This is our formal parlor. As you can see, it is arranged for entertaining guests. The portraits are those my wife quite likes. This one, of course, done by Mr. Peel, that she requested. But the others here were actually done before I married her. They were done by an artist by the name of Wollaston. And you may note that the portrait here and the portrait of the children on the other side all bear the same eyes. It is a feature of Mr. Wollaston's work which I cannot abide by. I find it
Creepy.
very disturbing and
Thank
nothing
you.
like the figures themselves.
I agree,
But
George.
Mr. Wollaston was very popular in these parts, and my wife, of course, having lost both of the children, now very much so, views these as too dear to ever put away, put down, although there were some better portraits of them made. Still, this is the room where we'll most likely bring guests if we are having a more formal situation, but this is not the family parlor. That is just over the way. Let me take you there.
It's a lovely blue, George. The little parlor. Isn't this lovely? He looks great for a ghost.
This is our family parlor.
Oh,
And,
look at that.
far
Look at
from
that
the
wallpaper.
formal parlor, this is the one where we spend our time together as a family.
I like
Quite
that
often in
wallpaper.
the evening, after our supper, we will read from the newspaper, or sometimes from books that we've been reading, perhaps a passage from a play. Very entertaining evenings spent here with friends and family alike. Also, you may note that my granddaughter plays at the harpsichord. I myself
that.
cannot raise a note on instrument
Look
or
at
by
that.
voice, but she has become very accomplished. And the wallpaper in here is a cherry blossom theme. It delights my wife, and I don't think I've ever seen a cheerier wallpaper in all of Virginia.
Oh, we were just saying that, George.
Might we
There you
then
go.
continue on out to the piazza? Yes?
It's like he could read our minds. I guess you can do that when you're a ghost. Piazza. Here we go.
I've often said that there's no home more happily situated in all of America than Mount Vernon.
Yeah,
The
you see
view
what
from
we
the
were
piazza
fighting for,
speaks to
folks.
that. You can see our neighbors in Maryland from here. We can see all the trade that is coming up the river. And it is an excellent place to spend the afternoon. My wife and I quite often will take our dinner right here on the piazza. Enjoy that breeze that cools you in the afternoon. Our guests have found it quite delightful as well.
Look at that.
I think that there is perhaps no place within the house that feels as much like a room without being one. It is my outdoor room, if you
I have
will.
one of those chairs.
But
Not
let me
this
take you a little
chair.
further into the new room.
Let's go, George. After you, sir. Mr. President. Our very first, can you imagine? The very first one, 2 terms. He said that was it. That's
This
where we get it from.
is what I call the new room.
Oh, look.
I began this project in 1776, but it was more than 10 years before I saw it completed. I wanted a more genteel room for entertaining guests, something that spoke of the direction I saw America headed, and certainly hoping that our fortunes would follow. Farming is the theme, of course, as it is through most of my home. In fact, one visitor,
Farmers
Mr.
should be
Vaughn, was
the
so impressed with what we were beginning here that he was kind enough to send me his very own fireplace here that is in itself a farm theme. And I've had it installed.
Look at that
I think
workmanship.
it works very well within the room.
Look at
You
that.
may also notice some of the art, for instance, the Hudson River painting here, just after the peace agreements
Hey,
were
Lee.
reached, and I was in Newburgh, New York. I had opportunity to take some of the land going up the Hudson River and saw some of the farmland. That western land that I feel will be very much so part of the expansion in our future. I think that that farmland, I've not seen any richer or more prosperous that has not yet been seized. And so I hope that at some point in the near future to acquire some of that land for myself, but I also see that being a great breadbasket for our future endeavors in farming. The plasterwork above, you might note, is that which is built by a gentleman I acquired from my sister. He was working at her house of Kenmore and began this plasterwork there, and I was so taken with it, I asked if he would come here and do a similar work here, but with my themes in mind instead. And this window is the window that Mr. Peel once said has what he called good painting light. He said painting from the north is always
So pretty.
an excellent choice. And so that is the crowning piece of the room, I feel. Well, I certainly hope you've enjoyed our walk through the house today. I hope you will come back and see us again very soon.
Thank you,
Great pleasure
George.
to be with you.
We appreciate you coming to visit. Well, how cool is that? It looked great for a ghost. 248, wow, years ago. Can you imagine? They sure did like the teal and that, what do you call that, insane asylum kind of green kind of thing. But man, that window was pretty. George was very big about design and decor, and so was Martha. And that was one of the big things. It was almost in every letter was something about fashion, where he'd order a new suit, or she'd get something or acquire some kind of new color or wood grain that was discovered somewhere, or something else, and wallpaper, those kind of things. But that place is absolutely gorgeous. So when you hear them speaking of Virginia, these, of course, the colony that was built up, really fast, and, one of the first ones out there, really populating, getting their towns in order. And these plantation people and farmers and planters and everything, he was huge on farming. He would just be aghast at what's going on now, which we've got to clear that up. Just get off their backs, give them their water, stop the chemicals, and just let them farm. And for the love of God, yank it out of the cold, clammy hands of William, sounds like hates, trying to be so good. Honey, I've seen friends of mine get their channels ripped out from under them so quick because they said 2 or 3 words, just gone, no word, nothing. So if I hesitate sometimes, this is why. I've seen some people. Wasn't it gorgeous, Uncommon? I'm telling you, it's just something else. And I wish we had gotten more of the scenery, because this is what they're talking about. When these guys, when you hear all these delegates and stuff from Virginia coming in to say the First Continental Congress, and the second one when they got together again, that's all that really means. Is like, this is the first time we got together. This is the second time. They'd stay together for months and come and go and whatever, and then call closed. And then they did the second one. And they'd hang out there in Philadelphia till the British got too close, and then they'd run, to somewhere else. But they moved around a lot, and that was something the British didn't quite get, because they were like, well, I don't understand. Didn't we just capture your capital? And they go, no, we just moved it. That's what they were kind of doing. And the British were like, I don't understand. We capture a castle, we own that, and that stops everything, and that ends the war, right? And I'm like, no, we just moved it. Absolutely drove them crazy. Everything the colonists were doing, and how they fought, and what they were doing, and how they were going about everything was just nauseating to the British. It just gave them a headache, and the king as well. So anyway, I'm glad we got to do that. That was really cool. That was Washington's. And this is one more. And then what we're going to do is we're going to watch the Liberty, because part of this, guys, is pulling out some of these people and trying to understand the awe of some of these characters that wanted to give up, wanted to quit, were on their knees begging God, give me a sign, tell me, how do I do one more foot? How do I keep going through this? How do I keep pushing through this? I've just seen, so many people I started this with are just going through and these unspeakable horrors. And in town as well, this was not a clean war. There's no such thing. There is suffering one end to the other. There are people, women left behind with their families dealing with smallpox that came through, or raiders coming through. You've got, pissed off Native Americans raiding, fighting amongst each other and showing up at the cabin door, 2:00 in the morning. You've got British soldiers coming through, quartering and whatever. You've got all these raiders, these little groups of loyalists that have, for lack of a better term, deputized into go around and find us supplies, or go around and find rebels that are hiding out. You just like in any war. It was no less confusing than the jungles of Vietnam. You didn't know who you were fighting. You didn't know who was the enemy, who was a spy. The chick you're dating could be, giving all your secrets to some British officer that's quartering in her father's house. These people are intermingling, and you've got, like I said, the loyalists that that are your town, your neighbors, that just don't want to change. This was just a third. It wasn't just in Boston, Massachusetts, a couple of upstarts meeting down at the Green Dragon, having a beer, and had an idea to, let's throw some tea in the ocean, in the harbor, and just refused to start paying all this stuff. And we're going to do our own thing because we're a bunch of upstarts. No, this was a belief. This was a striving for the unalienable rights, God-given, cannot be infringed. And at the same time, some of them owned slaves. So you have a constant storm of ideas and dreams and hopes and laws, and a growing country of possibilities. And at the same time, within there, you've got a lot of chicanery going on. We're propping up people and calling them heroes who pushed propaganda. Samuel Adams, Paul Revere, Ben Franklin, to form an idea, to push a narrative. You want this too. You want this too. If we don't stop this now, everything will be taxed. Everything, the king won't stop. Before you know it, they'll be telling us everything we can and can't do. And isn't that why our ancestors left? And then you have Britain, who is, you're British. You're our people. You just need to get in control. You need to start paying attention and follow what I tell you to do. And you need to submit to your king. So why are you even speaking? What is this? How dare you? We just helped you fight a war and got those Indians out of your backyard. You owe us a little money. You're getting a little too big for your britches. You better get back in order. Get back in line. Nope. We don't want your goods. We're going to boycott everything. We're going to make our own marbles. We're going to do it ourselves. And then the king sits there and says, wait it out. We need some money. We're in big debt. Britain was in a lot of debt. And the people were taxed to the teeth. Their own people. They probably still are now. So this was ideas on both sides clashing, and growth clashing, and the inevitable, the unconscionable, pushing all the Native Americans to the side. You savages, get out of here. Oh, wait, can you tell us how to grow this stuff and how to feed us first? Okay, no, okay, get away, go away. Oh, wait, what's this disease? What is this? Do you know anything about this? It's killing all our people. Oh, you're going to help us? Oh, that's great. Oh, an herb? Really? Grows in the woods? Are you kidding me? It's going to Thank you. Save my kids' lives. What are you still doing here? Get back to where we had you. Go that barren land that you can't grow anything, and just go hang out with your people there. The big white chief in Washington, in whatever, will come and help out later. We appreciate all you did, though. Thanks a lot. So glad you weren't using this. I get it, man. It was hard all over the place. But this is a people yearning to be free. This is a people who had enough. This is a people who knew when they saw evil, when, and saw it growing. And I want to make it perfectly clear that wasn't a good side and a bad side in this. This was people with an idea trying to do what they thought was right. It was Hessian soldiers that were rented, that were taught to fight. They showed up and they fought. They were fighting for one thing. They had a certain gusto behind them. That was what they did. That's what they knew. They were very well trained. And that was it. They were getting paid. They were rented. Then you had British soldiers. British soldiers are beaten into submission. They were whipped. They were, there was a certain style of getting them to be soldiers. They were the lower end class. There was a poem, and I can't remember exactly how it went, but it was something like better to be a thief than a this, or a this than a that. And it got down to dog, like all these like lower seedy kind of people. And then it got down to dog, and it's like rather be a dog than a soldier. They were looked down upon. And, if you messed up, you got out of line, you were punished. You were punished severely, usually in front of people. And they used that kind of mindset to keep people in control. That was their soldiers. They were put on a ship. They were sent 6 weeks out. They were put in these silly uniforms with big hats and tight wool things and sent into a country with trees. These people don't even know trees. Well, they had devastated so much of their stuff in their own country. They weren't used to all this wilderness. So they're just thrown out of the element, but they're fighting, because if they don't fight, they'll be hung. They'll be beaten. So they're fighting for one thing. And of course, all the generals are fighting for notoriety or whatever, or not to have to go back to the king and say that they failed. That's very high priority. And of course, power, whatever spoils of war that they get. Some just came in and were very evil, and others were just, going along to get along. And maybe everybody had their vices. Everybody had their reasons. Everybody had their what propelled them forward to go through this kind of horror, because war is that. It's horror. What do the colonists have? What are the ones who stood up and said no more? We're going to keep trying. We're going to keep doing. We're burying our friends. We're losing people here. And every time a cause loses people and they look behind and they say, there's blood on the field, man. We can't stop because they didn't. And for their memory. So they're starting to get that. They're starting to get that propelling them forward as well. And I get that all the time when I look back, and I look at these times, and I look back at these gentlemen and these women that didn't give up. And I say, we can't stop because they didn't. And it was just started out as a small group of the dedicated and devoted individuals. Changed their world. It's always inspirational. All right. Well, here we go. Before we jump onto the Liberty, when you think about the accomplishments of these people, and you're going to hear a story tonight, you're going to be introduced to another character that I just find just very interesting, and that is General Burgoyne. And he had a style about him, but you very quickly see his character change. Very fun guy. He's a playwright. He's a dandy, but watching his character change, like I said, is very interesting. But George Washington also, because you have so much of it, so much time. to get to see, and through the letters, and all the different places he slept, and everybody's got a story. But and then when you take out the nonsense and the cherry trees and all this cannot tell lie stuff and all that, he's very honorable, and he didn't like it when people were disloyal to him. That was like the worst stab for George Washington. Your Benedict Arnold's broke his heart. I don't think he ever recovered from that, but we'll get there. Benedict Arnold, another interesting character. But Burgoyne, he just had a way about him, and you're going to see it here. But with George, although he was very, very forthright in the, fashion and carrying how he looked. And, he didn't care for the wigs. He liked his own hair. And sometimes he powdered it to look like a wig. And he was very picky about things like this. He had one thing that went with him everywhere. And the fact that it still exists to this day blows my mind. And before we move forward into the wonderful story of Saratoga and Burgoyne and what's going on with Ben Franklin in France and what's going on with this poor continental army and as it's growing and why is it growing, I wanted you to stop and see something that puts back a little of that awe of the whole thing. You just saw Mount Vernon. Imagine everywhere, like I said, that silly thing where it's like George Washington slept here. Where I am in New Jersey, it's like everywhere you go, there was a room, where he stopped somewhere and there's no way he slept that much. It's just silly. But anyway, where did he sleep? Well, he had a tent, and it was carried wherever he went. And my friends, it still exists. And I don't know what it is. When you see certain things, I don't know what it does for you, whether it's the Lincoln Memorial or the Liberty Bell, or if it's something that, sets your patriotic heart wherever you live in your country, that sets your heartbeat. It might be a story or a person or a place. But this kind of does it for me. Because if you think about the chances that you would ever imagine this is still existing, it blows your mind. So before we get into Liberty, how about a little of this one? And what they're doing here is great. This is, I think it's the Museum of the American Revolution. And it's quite fabulous.
When the American Revolution erupts, the men who are to fight it, farmers and fishermen from New England, hunters from the backwoods of Pennsylvania and Virginia, distrust one another almost as much as they do the British. The challenge to their leader, General George Washington, is to unite them. He stays in the field with his men through blistering heat and bitter cold. His tent is both his home and headquarters. Through the entire war, he will see his Virginia home of Mount Vernon for only a few days. When the Continental Army rallies to secure the independence of the new nation, George Washington's tent is carefully packed away and preserved as a treasure. But its service is not over. The tent is passed down to Martha Washington's great-granddaughter, the wife of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. When she flees the violence of the Civil War, the tent falls to the protection of Selina Gray, an enslaved woman. The tent is exhibited to the public in the nation's capital, claiming the mantle of George Washington for the Union cause. After the war, a Pennsylvania minister manages to buy the tent, preserving this symbol of unity for a still divided nation. He dreams of building a museum to honor Washington's example and the American Revolution. Today, Washington's tent is here at the Museum of the American Revolution, still bearing witness to the endurance and strength of our national fabric, these stitches that tie us together as Americans.
How about that? Did you ever thought you'd see George Washington's tent? Is that not amazing? And it just makes you go, how many nights did he spend in this thing? How many decisions were made under this tent? How is this material still in existence? How many meetings? Who was under here talking to him? How many generals or it just blows your mind. It just absolutely blows your mind, because you can go to certain places like the White House or whatever. And right now I wouldn't go there because it's full of demons, but you go through the White House and I know for a fact that there's a lot of it that's not original. There's certain rooms or certain places that are, but it got all tore apart and changed out, and stuff they just don't let the public know. It's insane how much just lies, and it's like this really nasty, horrible cake with just fillings, with like surprise fillings and things stuck in there, like, oh my god, like the Little Rascal cake, the weep, whoa, 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 whoa. Here, put that in. Do you remember that one? Here, put this in. It hurts my brush. Remember all that? With the cake that exploded on Spanky and Stymie and all of them. But anyway, it's like that. That's what the world is right now with all this stuff. But it has all this like fondant icing on top of those beautiful flowers and butterflies and just this all sugar-coated bullshit, right? And once you dig into that cake and you find out, oh my God, it's got this rancid, nasty stuff, and we got to get that out and get this out. And it takes time. But anyway, you can still eat the butterflies. It's all right. They're still going to taste good. You know what I mean? So anyway, if you made sense of that, you're doing okay. So George Washington blows my mind. I think getting to know some of these characters maybe helps you understand a little bit of the decisions they made and why they did and the circumstances. And so easy to say, oh, I'd have gone this way and done that. Yeah, but there was a great big old impassable swamp full of alligators that nobody talks about. I was there. I saw, you didn't, those kind of things. It's better to kick back and pull back and get the whole view of it, because, honey, whether you know it or not, you might be going through something right now that if it was written in history books, what would they write about you? What character would you be like? What inspiration would move you forward to find your inner you, your inner warrior? It's interesting. All right. One of those characters, this guy's so funny. One of those characters is General Burgoyne. And I didn't know that much about him until I started digging. And he's a trip. And I'm trying not to give it away. I like the guy. But he grew up in this war, the hard way. And I cannot imagine the walk and the struggle of going down Lake Champlain, what the strategy was, the mindset of this general and what he had learned and how he was taught to lead. He seemed to be very stuck on strategy, and he had very little adapt and overcome, which is like your first rule as a soldier. Whoa, we had a plan, but guess what? We got to come up with another one right quick. You have to be able to think on your feet, adapt and overcome. And he said, nope, there is a strategy. There is a plan. This is what we're doing. And it took him a long time to let that go. And you're going to see. So I wanted to emphasize that fact. I made you a little video, and we're going to watch this, and then we're going to get into our liberty. I love the handwriting. Man, it off. Doggone it. All right, guys. There it is. Signature.
Early in the American War of Independence, Major General Burgoyne went to America, where he witnessed the ineffective British victory at Bunker Hill. General John Burgoyne, often referred to as Gentleman Johnny, was known for his lavish and somewhat extravagant lifestyle, even during military campaigns. When Gentleman Johnny embarked on his campaign from Canada through Lake Champlain, he indeed brought along a rather opulent army train. Burgoyne's army train included not only the essential military supplies, but also a variety of luxury items. Among these were champagne, fine wines, and other delicacies. These items seemed more suited for a grand social event rather than a military campaign. Along with the champagne and fine wines, Burgoyne brought along a large number of personal luxuries. This included silverware, china, and even a personal library. The presence of women and children, including officers' wives and mistresses, added to the non-combatant numbers and the overall burden of the march.
He was pretty, wasn't he? That's what he looked like after.
The challenges faced by
At the
Burgoyne's
end,
army were
not
numerous
right
and
after the war.
significant. The terrain was incredibly difficult, with dense forests, swamps, and rivers that had to be crossed.
That would have been a rough 4 years.
The Americans employed scorched earth tactics, destroying bridges, felling trees across roads, and burning crops to slow the British advance. Additionally, the army faced supply shortages and harsh weather conditions. Disease and desertions further reduced their numbers and morale.
Adapt and overcome. Drop
This
trees in their
culminated in
path.
his surrender at the Battle of Saratoga, a pivotal moment in the war that helped secure French support for the American cause. After returning to England, Burgoyne faced criticism for his defeat, but continued to serve in various capacities, including as Commander-in-Chief in Ireland. He also enjoyed a successful career as a playwright, with his most famous work being The Heiress. Burgoyne passed away on August 4, 1792, in London, and was buried in Westminster Abbey.
Something, huh?
The British defeat at Saratoga shocked the world. Few believed the Americans could win a regular engagement against the British Army. Influenced by the American triumph, France entered into an alliance with the United States that would prove critical to American victory in the war.
And look what they're doing today. Fell a long way, France. You need to get in there and clean that country up, babe. Something else. General Burgoyne deserves to be remembered. He was a pistol. All right, let's see what he did. Let's look into this. Good old Liberty. Episode 4. Here we go.
Hello, I'm Forrest Sawyer. There are times when one person's character can change the course of history. As we saw in the last episode, the determination of George Washington saved the Revolution in 1776. In this, the 4th episode of Liberty, you're going to meet another amazing character, British General John Burgoyne. You may never have heard of Burgoyne, but because of events which he set in motion, you and I carry American, not British, passports. In 1777, General Burgoyne had every reason to be confident. The 13 states faced devastating odds. The colonists always had imported manufactured goods from England. So now, They find themselves low on gunpowder, tents, even uniforms. At times, their soldiers must face the British Army with little more than sharpened iron spears. The states need help. Without support from a foreign power, the cause and the revolution will be lost.
I think it's been a really good series, guys. I'm so glad I found it.
The French port of Nantes, December 1776. A ship arrives carrying an important visitor from America. England's ambassador to France is alarmed. He sends a secret message to London.
To Lord Weymouth, I learned yesterday evening that the famous Dr. Franklin has arrived at Nantes. Some people think that he has come to France on personal business. I am convinced that he is here on some secret business from Congress. He is a devious man, incapable of truth, and will, I'm sure, try to draw the French into openly supporting the cause of the rebels.
Not bad.
To the French Foreign Minister, we request an audience with Your Excellency when we may have the opportunity of presenting our credentials. We beg to acquaint Your Excellency that we are appointed and fully empowered by the Congress of the United States to negotiate a treaty of friendship and commerce between our two countries. Benjamin Franklin.
Wordsmith.
Britain and France were traditional enemies, of course. They had fought one another in wars for a long time. And in particular, in the previous war, the French and Indian War, the French had been catastrophically defeated. A very substantial part of their colonial empire had been lost. And what was perhaps even worse than the actual material loss, they were intensely humiliated. The French felt that they had lost their honor in suffering successive defeats at the hands of the British. And there's an intense, bitter yearning for revenge.
That one cuts deep.
The Americans realize that the fate of the revolution depends on France. They have sent their only experienced diplomat to argue their case.
Franklin arrives in France to convince Louis XVI's government that they should come in on the side of these American rebels against their hated enemy, Great Britain. Naturally, the French are reluctant. As eager as they were to seek revenge, they're reluctant to get themselves caught if the Americans should suddenly settle with the British and the French find themselves in a world war with Britain without the support of the Americans. So there's a good deal of suspicion on the part of the French whether the Americans have the stuff to make this revolution stick. So they're looking for victories, which of course they see none.
King Louis XVI refuses to receive Benjamin Franklin. This is not going to be an easy mission.
I love that. Okay, so now we've watched Ben Franklin go from being chastised in Parliament in Britain, right? You know, the man of letters, you know, just didn't even say anything, turned and walked out in shame. Now he's gone back to France. Like, hold on. We're here to see if we can get this alliance now. You don't want to be hanging out there if Britain gets, wild hair. Maybe we can get together. Louis says, Watch what happens next.
Canada, June 1777. British troops assemble on the banks of the Richelieu River. They plan a major attack on the United States from the north. It is an enormous force, led by the dashing, theatrical, larger-than-life General John Burgoyne.
I can't ask for anything better than this army of professionals. The mob of undisciplined provincials won't have a chance against them. I have instructed the officers to count on the bayonet. The rebels can't stand up against the bayonet. They hide behind trees, relying on their rifle pieces.
Gentleman Johnny Burgoyne was a socialite general, a young man about town, charming, innumerable friends, very competent playwright. Burgoyne, better playwright than general. His farces are still worth listening to.
In England, Horace Walpole, a political insider, comments.
Ah, yes, Burgoyne the pompous. He's the natural son of Lord Bingley, but he did not inherit any of his estate. He's a gambler. Some say he cheats, but in fact he plays very well. I heard him speak in Parliament. He never impressed me much with his brilliance, but he's a useful commander. He feeds the press and the public with many exciting accounts of his exploits. He's as noisy as Howe is quiet.
Real quick, I have to tell you something I found out about Burgoyne. One of the reasons that gentleman right there called him pompous, it fits. But here's the thing. The reason he was a good commander, I mean, even after, he loses Saratoga, spoiler alert, there wasn't a bad word said about him. Why? Because of the way he led. Now, he didn't lead by example. He had an odd way. He just was more of a speaker than he was a disciplinarian. And most of the generals that ran their regiments were very much into discipline. Like I said earlier, this is one of the reasons they were called lobsterbacks. It really wasn't because of the red coats. It's because of the scars on their back. So that's a misnomer, thinking it's just as easy to think it's just the red coats, because they were called red coats. But the reason they got the lobsterback moniker is because they were these British soldiers, they whipped the hell out of them. And you'll see later on when we start talking about Sons of Liberty and things like that, how they brought that into the streets, into Boston, Mass, and places like, where they were occupying, to try to get regain control that they really never had to begin with. So this guy, he leads, like I said, with words and with instruction, and he's a partier. He's very fond of champagne and wine, and he's got all this stuff he's bringing with him. He brings this lavish stuff, like you saw George Washington had a tent. Well, wait till you hear about his. And the thing was, is he wouldn't let his officers beat the men. And he would go out and try to explain things, and this is what we're going to do. So they would do anything for him. They would follow him anywhere. And he was very into the partying and the singing and stuff at night. So his whole caravan was like, I almost said Diddy's entourage, but I didn't want to give you the wrong picture there, because it wasn't like that. But it's more like, he's the party guy, and this is entourage, and he's doing good, and they're riding on his coattails, and they're all just yay us, and it's massive. It's almost 9,000 soldiers. So he just chose to do it this way. It's not very effective, mind you. He just has a lot of friends. You see what I mean? He's just a different way of going about it.
As a member of Parliament, Burgoyne has used his political pull to get command of this northern campaign. Burgoyne's master plan is for two British armies to seize control of the Hudson River, one attacking down from Canada, the other up from New York City. This would isolate New England from the rest of the colonies.
This is the famous Hudson, Lake Champlain, Richelieu corridor, which is one of the most fought over places on Earth. Everybody knew that if you could get control of it, you then were master of the northeastern United States. And it was particularly important for the British to have control of it, because then they could use Quebec, Montreal at one end and New York at the other as their two main bases, and just shoot up and down the corridor. And New England and most of New York would be cut off from the rest of what we'll call the United States. It wasn't yet the United States, but the rest of the United States.
A young soldier fighting with Burgoyne, Sergeant Roger Lamb, keeps a diary of his experiences.
This is going to be a critical expedition. General Burgoyne tells us to get ready. Ready for hard work. Ready to give our lives. We must not retreat.
The soldiers board ships, and Burgoyne's armada sets sail. Their destination is Albany. After Albany is secured, the main British Army under General Howe will move north from New York City and take control of the lower Hudson River. This is the master plan approved by London, but it is left up to the generals in the field, Howe and Burgoyne, to work out the details of the operation. They cannot expect to turn to England for help.
The time interval for a dispatch from America to go home to London, to reach ministers in Whitehall, to be considered and acted on, and for the consequences to begin to affect things in America would very seldom be less than 9 months. And if you're talking about trying to organize some major military operation, which obviously takes a long time, then it could be as long as 15 or 18 months before the repercussions begin to make themselves felt, by which time, of course, the chances are the situation has changed out of all recognition anyway.
Is that not mind-blowing to you? The communication. It cannot be stressed enough how much of an effect it had on this war. Communications in between the colonies, in between commanders, in between just, it goes on and on and on. So, like I said, it's writing a letter. You're writing it out with the quill and ink, right? And these beautiful handwriting. I'll never get over looking at the different penmanships from back then. They speak to you. They speak about the person and the character, and that's one of the things they tried to steal from us by going into just doing texting and taking your personality out of it, and the emotion out of it. And then they threw some emojis at us like that's going to take the place of it. And as much as I love bacon and hearts and I love seeing them, it doesn't take it. They realized we had to inject some kind of emotion into it because it was emotionless and so easy to take wrong when you're reading something and how the person meant it, because the emotion's out. Well, when you look at this writing, it's so beautiful, and it does really show the character of the person. And I think it's mind-boggling. We can look at it from almost 300 years later, and feel it. They try to take that from you. That's why it's important. It's not just kids should read the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Of course, this is my opinion, and you're welcome to it. But, that they're trying to, it's multi-layered, but it's the emotion too. It's the character. If you notice, they try to separate you so far from creativity and emotion and things like that. And that's why we've often talked about, I know it sounds like I'm going crazy here, but bear with me. In the paranormal, we talk about these aliens that come back and they're trying to figure out what this emotion is that we have. That's what boggles their mind. You know which ones I'm talking about. And there seems to be groups that have gotten so evolved that they took emotion out, and all of the things that we kind of still hang on to, like, enjoying certain, in foods, and we're very textile and we're very emotion based human beings. Yeah. So when you go back and you look at Burgoyne and trying to understand why he did things, he had a plan. His idea was strategy. Like this guy said, he was a better playwright, but the men loved him. And he's got that British thing going on where they have no idea what's going on colonial wise. And these people, why would they fight? What are they doing? Why can't they just go back, to their huts or whatever and mind, the king? And it's their downfall because they don't get it. It's a difference. That's the difference. There's a difference between the characters of the people and the people that different groups that are fighting both sides of this doggone war. And it's within if you look at this picture right here, and you look, take the ships out of it, you just look at all these houses as far as the eye can see, and you're talking about this is what would be considered a small city back then. And in each one of the houses, you have no idea, friend or foe. And these people have been struggling like this for, going back 15 years. And it's finally boiled to this point where they have to sort it. They have to either find a way to coexist or split off into whatever, you go over there, do your thing, and we'll stay over here and do ours, but we're taking all the good stuff with us because we were fine and you started a bunch of, you know what I mean? In this, it's the reverse. They were all Britain, and all of a sudden, no, we're Virginians, we're this, and now it's maybe we're, United Colonies because we don't want your stuff. So again, like I said, it's not evil against good versus evil. There's both within, because we did some awful stuff too, believe me. And that's what war is. It sorts people one way or another.
In New York City, General Howe is making preparations for some large operation. George Washington is with the main American army in New Jersey, watching and waiting for Howe's next move.
General Howe's strange maneuvers puzzle us beyond measure. One day his ships seem ready to head up the Hudson. The next day they seem headed toward Philadelphia. I'm completely perplexed as to what his real design is. Our conduct must be governed by his. If we can keep General Howe at bay, I think any success that Mr. Burgoyne has will be partial and temporary.
Burgoyne's army travels down Lake Champlain, a smooth 3-week sail. On July 1st, they arrive at what everyone considers the single largest obstacle of the campaign, Fort Ticonderoga.
Looks so
the
good
fort
on the map.
dominates a narrowing in the lake. No invaders can get their boats past this point without coming within range of the fort's deadly cannon. This stronghold is being defended by 2,000 heavily armed Americans. Overlooking Ticonderoga is Mount Defiance. It is steep and rugged. Nobody imagines that it can be fortified. But in an extraordinary feat of military engineering, Burgoyne's soldiers managed to cut a path up its back slope. The following morning, the Americans are stunned to see British guns trained down on them. They realize that the fort is indefensible and flee for their lives.
There they go.
It was a very emotional deal for the Americans. Fort Ticonderoga stood as the great bastion to stop invasions from the north. And suddenly, the British were able to breach it. And this had a tremendous impact on America. The tie had broken, and the British were streaming down the Champlain Valley. It looked like all was lost.
Torrents of success. The opposition is swept away, all of us. Officers and men see the end in sight. Albany within our grasp. New England finally submitting to British rule. To Lord Germain, nothing can now stop us on our passage to Albany. Credit for this victory goes to my officers and superior equipment. My merit is small. After we take Albany, I request the King's leave to return to England. My constitution is not fitted for the American winter.
In London, an ecstatic King George III gets the news of the fall of Ticonderoga.
I beat them. I have beat the rebels.
In France, Benjamin Franklin's spirit is far from broken. He answers an inquiry from a British scientist with some timely advice for the king.
You ask my opinion on whether King George's palace should have pointed lightning conductors or rounded ones. If I had one wish, it would be that he had no conductors at all. For it is only since he thought himself and his family safe from the thunder of heaven that he dared use his own thunder to destroy his innocent subjects. Benjamin Franklin.
Franklin's hope of an alliance with the French king has been seriously damaged by the American loss of Ticonderoga. But for the French people, this master politician is fast becoming the revolution's greatest salesman.
He symbolized Republican simplicity, the new man emerging from the New World in America. He was a myth. The figure of Franklin was extremely popular. In each French home there was a portrait of Franklin. His face could be found on the bottom of beer glasses. He was everywhere.
There's a kind of radical chic running through the French aristocracy, a kind of excitement over this new Republican America, and Franklin plays upon it superbly. He is well aware of what he ought to do as a traditional ambassador, but he doesn't behave as a traditional ambassador. He dresses in plain clothes, he wears no sword, he wears no wig, and as you can well imagine in the court of Versailles, this was astonishing for an ambassador to present himself in such a plain manner.
Talk about propaganda. Franklin had a very keen sense of this. He was able to spin images that could incarnate the cause. His movement to the little fur hat was very much in keeping with this. You know, there's a portrait of Franklin looking very much the dandy with his silk vest and his gentlemanly clothes. All that was abandoned for the fur hat. He became the natural American.
Franklin's fur hat and Republican ideas are the rage of Paris high society. But this is not enough to sway the king. Now more than ever, he wants proof, hard proof in the form of military victories, that the 13 states can hold out against the British. Burgoyne's ships have just arrived at the southernmost tip of Lake Champlain. The lake does not connect with his next objective, the Hudson River. The British must now disembark and travel by land. Burgoyne's army of over 8,000 is a huge, unwieldy force.
This is incredible.
Half are British, half are German mercenaries, the notorious Hessians. Traveling with the army are 2,000 women and a large number of children.
It was a long-standing tradition for enlisted men, in order to keep them in the army, to be allowed to bring their dependents with them. The women in the camp did all the housekeeping chores. They cooked, they cleaned, they nursed, they foraged. They were essential in many ways for the survival of the army.
High-ranking officers and their families live in style. Baroness Frederica von Riedessel is traveling with her husband, the commander of the Hessian troops.
I sent back most of my baggage and have kept only a small summer wardrobe. As we were going to be traveling further, I had a small carriage built with seats for my 3 children and the servants. So we are traveling in the midst of the soldiers, who are merry, singing songs and burning with a desire for victory. General Burgoyne, he likes to make himself comfortable. He spends most of the night singing and drinking and cavorting with the wife of one of his officers, who is his mistress. She is as fond of champagne as he is.
One of the great mysteries of Burgoyne is how he thought he could carry both his army and all of the baggage and so many what seemed to us superfluous people with him down the back country. I mean, he had 30 carts with his personal possessions, including several cases of champagne and changes of clothing. Seemed totally inappropriate to this situation.
Down the back country. Welcome to America.
Burgoyne is moving through a vast wilderness.
I love it.
This is hostile territory.
This thing.
Every hill, every river presents unseen hazards. To guide him to the Hudson River, Burgoyne has recruited a force of Iroquois Indians.
There we are.
Both sides, both the British and the colonials, were working for the participation of the Iroquois in the war, although officially they were supposedly urging the Iroquois to remain neutral and stay out of this white man's war.
When it came time for the Indians to choose between the Americans and the British, most Indian peoples found it easy to choose the British instead of the rebellious Americans. For generations, they had been living side by side with the Americans, and they didn't actually like the Americans very much. The Americans tended to move in on Indian lands without asking permission and without having a treaty. It was the British who had tried to keep this kind of land encroachment to a minimum or to eliminate it altogether.
Hard times, man.
Native American people fought for their own homes. They realized that if the colonists won, that their lands would be overrun. They had no great alliance or great support of the British government, but they realized that the British government was their only hope here in defending their homeland against the colonists. It was the lesser of two evils, but it certainly was the preferred choice.
You know my people.
Those Indian nations which joined the British have sent Burgoyne 400 of their finest warriors. They will be his scouts, the eyes and ears of the invasion.
This is awful. Look what they're
Only
going
23 miles separate Lake Champlain from the Hudson River.
through the wilderness.
23 miles of dense, primeval forest of enormous pines and maple trees. Burgoyne's mile-long train of carts, pulled by pack animals, must somehow hack its way through this seemingly endless wilderness.
Can you imagine?
Geography becomes his worst enemy.
But he had a strategy.
People back home can't imagine what this country is like. Hundreds of rivers and lakes. And a person can wander 1,000 miles without meeting another human being. The porcupines are the size of a small dog. Tasty when roasted, like a suckling pig.
Europeans had long since devastated their forests. So when they come to America, they see all of these trees. They're overwhelmed by the forests. There was no New York thruway to come down on. They had to hack their way through forests and trails. And it was a excruciating experience. It took them months.
The route must cross deep ravines, swamps, and bogs. Burgoyne's soldiers must build 40 bridges and causeways, some over 2 miles long. Progress is excruciatingly slow.
Exactly.
Less than 1 mile a day.
Is it really, D-Rock?
For the Hessians, this is their first taste of the American wilderness.
How you like the
If I
setup?
weren't here, I would have never believed that such a terrible place as this exists in the world. It's hot and sticky in the day, and at night it is cold and foggy. Last night we had thunderstorms with much heavier thunder and lightning than I've ever experienced in Germany. In camp we are constantly waging war against the flies. At night, snakes come visit us in our tents. I cannot describe how terrified I am of them.
It's not all fun and games, is it?
In New York City, the other British general, William Howe, is loading supplies and 18,000 of his troops onto ships. Washington, with the main army in New Jersey, watches helplessly as Howe's troops set sail. On a clear July day, the Armada disappears over the horizon.
All he knew when Howe left in the fleet sailing out of New York Harbor was that Howe had gone out of New York. Where was he going to show up? Was he going to be at Philadelphia? Was he going down to Chesapeake Bay? Washington had to move his army to counter Howe. And he had men all along the eastern seaboard. He possibly might be going down to Charleston. He didn't know. But he had to keep his army mobile and ready to chase Howe to counter wherever he showed up.
Unable to spare any men, Washington makes an appeal to the New England militia to stop Burgoyne's advance.
Gentlemen, General Burgoyne's plan is to cut communications between the northern and southern states. He must be speedily and vigorously opposed. We are looking to your militia for support. Every motive of self-preservation, of liberty and happiness has a claim on your efforts. General Washington.
As Burgoyne begins to approach more populated areas, he too makes an appeal to the inhabitants.
This is great. This is great.
This crusade is to restore to you the blessings of legal government. You Americans are invited to join us in this glorious task. Civilians will not be bothered if you remain quietly in your homes and make available to our army forage for our animals.
Burgoyne's words have the opposite effect.
Burgoyne talked too much and wrote too much. I mean, it was a very high-profile invasion that he conducted thanks to his own style of conducting it. And in fact, helped to solidify American motivation to resist him.
Right? Colonists said, I don't know you.
For nearby farmers and townspeople, the advancing British army has suddenly become very real.
Yep, here, right on your front porch.
The Americans start to assemble into their militia units. The Englishman, Nicholas Cresswell, is finding his travel plans disrupted.
New recruits are collecting in every town on the continent. In a few months, the rascals will be stronger than ever. Even the preachers have turned their pulpits into drums, summoning all to arms among this cursed rabble. Damn them all!
Burgoyne is beginning to encounter scattered opposition. He issues a more ominous proclamation.
To those who continue this stubborn rebellion will come the vengeance of a state against its willful outcasts. The Indian forces under my direction will wreak devastation, famine, and every imaginable horror on those who resist us.
Even though Indians and colonists often got along, trading with one another and forming alliances, most colonial Americans were terrified of the native peoples who were at their borders. These Indians were very effective warriors. They could strike over long distances, suddenly, swiftly, and then disappear again into the forest and head home. As these stories developed over time, they became embellished, they became exaggerated, and they achieved a currency in colonial America that made Indians very feared warriors indeed. General Burgoyne, knowing this fear, used it as a weapon of terror and publicized his Indian allies in northern New York.
Appreciate that.
But Burgoyne's strategy backfires. In late July, a young woman, Jane McCrae, engaged to a British officer, is brutally murdered.
And again, used as propaganda.
No one will ever know for certain how Jane McCrae was killed and by whom. But the Americans knew from the very first news of this killing how they would use it. They would use it to great effect against the British by playing upon people's fears of these Indian warriors.
Like the Boston Massacre.
The murder of Jane McCrae is retold and embellished in melodramatic paintings and exaggerated newspaper accounts. The story spreads throughout New England.
The Americans, who were masters of propaganda, said, here is a woman, a beautiful woman, who was a fiancée of one of the officers with Burgoyne. And Burgoyne's Indians scalped her. Now, if this is what's being done to the women who are allied with his own forces, what are they going to do with your wives and your children when they get here and they're coming?
He's feisty. Look out.
And the New England troops just turned out in droves.
Look out.
The swelling American forces slow Burgoyne's progress. The rebels block the way with huge trees. They burn bridges and divert streams, turning Burgoyne's path into a swamp.
Adapt and overcome. They didn't have that. We did.
The enemy are at home here. They know this damn countryside, so they have a huge advantage. Every step for us, scouting, reconnoitering, brings new perils. Everywhere there are streams to cross and bridges to build. It takes a week to advance 1 mile.
Wear them down. Wear them down. Make them tired. Make them give
The
up.
Americans do everything they can to impede his advance, to slow it, to make it expensive. And it is very slow, and it is very expensive in terms of labor and in terms of the British supplies consumed. The more you can stretch out the march of the army, in time, the more of its own supplies that it's bringing with it are being consumed by that army.
Fascinating.
This is not the war of decisive battles, which Burgoyne has come to fight.
He's not giving up.
These supplies. For every hour I devote to figuring out how this army must fight, I have to spend 20 hours trying to figure out how to keep it fed.
He's absolutely over it. He's getting there. He's getting there.
Campaigning before the coming of the railway and before the coming of preserved food was a nightmare for generals, and it was their greatest problem. Fighting battles was easy. Supplying the armies while you marched them to the place where you were going to fight the battle was an absolute endless scenario of difficulties for the general.
Desperate for supplies, Burgoyne's soldiers plunder nearby farms.
Plundering and the raping and
This first contact with the army terrifies the civilian population.
the horrid.
But the people are afraid not only of swords and bullets, they know that armies carry with them deadly diseases, especially that most terrible of killers, smallpox.
And the hygiene.
Language cannot describe the scenes of misery.
Horrid.
I came across a large barn crowded full of men with this disorder. They lay in their own excrement, unable to see, speak, or walk. Abscesses formed on all parts of their body. Several had large maggots, an inch long, on every part of their body and crawling out of their ears. Death visits us every hour.
Diseases that occurred in epidemic proportions, such as diphtheria, smallpox, yellow fever, could decimate a population. As much as 10 or 12% of the population could die in a very brief period of time. Smallpox inoculation in the 18th century consisted of taking a threaded needle, drawing the thread through an infected pustule, and then pulling the needle under the skin of a person who was not infected, thus infecting that person through inoculation.
But inoculation is unreliable. There is a real risk of dying from the procedure. Abigail Adams writes to John in Philadelphia.
My dearest friend, I am as healthy as I have ever been since my inoculation with the smallpox. All of my attention is devoted to the care of little Charles. We tried 3 times to inoculate him, but unfortunately they did not take, and now he has contracted the disease the natural way. He is very bad, John. The symptoms rose to a burning fever, stupefaction, and a delirium which has lasted 48 hours. Eruptions have taken place, and his face will be quite covered.
Working if we want to stay alive.
Time is slipping away. Burgoyne hears of a large supply of horses near the town of Bennington, 12 miles east of the Hudson in what is now Vermont. He decides to send a company of soldiers to seize them. He expects no opposition.
We have reliable reports that 80% of the population are friends of the British cause. All they need to come out of hiding is the arrival of our army to protect them.
There's no doubt that Burgoyne exaggerated loyalist action and sentiment. Like many people, he believed the good news that he heard or that he was willing to create for himself and did not wish to hear bad news. He would not be the first nor the last general in history to do that.
To seize the horses near Bennington, Burgoyne dispatches 800 Hessian soldiers. The German horsemen put on their 20-pound riding boots and march off into the wilderness.
Off they go.
At their head is Lieutenant Colonel Friedrich Baum. For someone who is to enlist the support of the Loyalists, he is a strange choice. Lieutenant Colonel Baum does not speak one word of English.
Send him out there to
Und General Burgoyne, wir haben 5 Gefangene genommen, die uns darüber informierten, dass 1800 Männer in Bennington sind, die jedoch weglaufen werden, wenn wir uns annähern.
Baum had been told, don't worry, you see men in farm clothes with muskets. They're mostly loyalists coming to join you, so don't let them worry you. So he saw these Americans, old farmers going around with muskets on their shoulders. He thought they were coming in to help him, so he didn't do anything about it. Suddenly, the fighting started and they hit him from all sides.
Boom! Surprise!
It's a trap. The party is surrounded. Baum and all of his men are killed or calculated. Not only are most of the local farmers hostile to the British cause, worse, they are armed.
There you go. He didn't know what
This
to do
was
with
not
that.
anticipated by the British, because Britain was not a country of an armed people. The ordinary people are not allowed to carry weapons. And the notion of an entire countryside of farmers turning out with muskets to fight was quite alien to the British rural scene.
Imagine
The great bulk of the country
he
is
couldn't
with
read
the
room,
Congress,
you know?
in principle and zeal. New Hampshire, a country almost unpeopled in the last war, is now crawling with the most active, most rebellious race on the continent, and hangs like a gathering storm on my left.
He had to consider whether it was prudent to go on. The season was getting late. The New England militia were gathering. There was no evidence that Howe was going to support him adequately from the south. Reason should have suggested that he stop and that he abandon the expedition, and he didn't. Why? I think vanity. He said later on in the House of Commons, what would the army and the country have thought of me if I'd stopped?
Just kept going. He had a strategy. Crazy.
In late August, General Howe's armada is sighted on Delaware Bay. His plan is to take Philadelphia, the capital, first, and then meet up with Burgoyne. The war is now advancing on 2 fronts. Washington and his army rush to Philadelphia's defense. Outside of Albany, members of the Northern militia are gathering to oppose Burgoyne. They are led by the very popular General Horatio Gates. John Adams writes home from Philadelphia.
My dearest friend, Congress has sent Gates to take charge of the army in the North. This is what people from New England wanted. Now let them turn out in force. A fleet of 100 ships was seen off the Delaware Capes. Where, how this scourge of God and plague of mankind is going to land, nobody can guess. But don't be anxious for my safety. When Howe comes to Philadelphia,
We're gonna run.
I shall run away, I suppose, with the rest of Congress.
They keep moving.
Dearest friend, we have not heard any news from the North. I long for some grand, important action somewhere. Burgoyne, with his grand airs, must be humbled to the dust. The call for men is hurting the farm. My head Negro has left in the middle of haying. What will I do now?
Everything's just turned upside down.
I
Nobody
am
can
not
do
going
anything.
to complain. If I have neither molasses nor sugar nor tea nor coffee. I can live without them. As long as what I enjoy I share with my dearest partner, and with liberty.
Their letters back and forth were priceless. To tell everything going on around them.
Outside of Albany, the militia continue to pour in, reinforced by the soldiers who have fled Fort Ticonderoga.
Yep. Here they come.
Burgoyne continues his advance. It takes him another month to reach Saratoga.
This is
From here, it seems easy.
excruciating.
A road leads straight to his objective, Albany, 20 miles to the south. But there is a new crisis. Burgoyne's Indian scouts are deserting the army.
Uh-oh.
Once the campaign begins to be too long, and I think they probably sense before anyone else does, Americans or British, that this is going badly, they begin to drift
This
away.
ain't good, boys.
They
Let's go
disappear.
home.
So by the time he gets into the real combat zone of this invasion, he's lost his screening force.
Let these crazy
Without his
white
Indian
people go
guides
next.
to serve as his eyes and ears, Burgoyne has no way of knowing where the enemy is
God.
or how strong their forces are.
Wow. What a spot.
The American army, with its citizen soldiers of the New England militia, is now over 7,000 strong.
You're right. You should do a live
Washington
from
has
there.
sent Daniel
B-roll.
Morgan and his formidable sharpshooters as reinforcements. They are encamped on a piece of land called Freeman's Farm, overlooking the only road to Albany.
Going to meet another very important
And
character
now
here.
they wait.
Who's it going to be? Come on, history people.
September 19th. Burgoyne's troops march into a clearing at Freeman's Farm.
Yeah,
They
isn't it
see
cool?
no American soldiers.
You can feel it on the ground, B-Rock. You can. You go out
Suddenly,
there
from the surrounding woods, they hear a strange
Feel it.
sound. Turkey
Check it out.
gobbling.
What's that?
It is the secret code of Daniel Morgan's Rifle Corps.
Guerrilla
Their
warfare,
order,
baby.
in flagrant breach of 18th century
Exactly,
military
Henry.
etiquette,
Yes,
is to
yes.
aim directly at the officers.
And his hero leg.
Several Americans place themselves in high trees, and when they see a British officer's uniform, they kill him by deliberately aiming at his person. Men, and particularly officers, drop on either side of me.
They've never.
The Americans too have heavy losses, but more and more of their reinforcements keep arriving.
Burgoyne is astounded. Not only has a huge army assembled from nowhere, worse, the Americans, whom he has called a mob of undisciplined provincials, are clearly able to fight.
Clearly.
Burgoyne sends a frantic message to General Howe, who he assumes is still in New York.
The American army now between us and Albany outnumbers us. No operation, my lord, has yet been undertaken from New York to support us. There is no movement up the Hudson River. I never dreamed I would be left to make my way through this hostile countryside, surrounded by enemies, without any cooperation from New York. Burgoyne.
Big man. He's a big man.
What was supposed to happen with Burgoyne and Howe in 1777 is a puzzle which historians have been teasing out ever since it happened, and it's still very far from clear. If Howe had seriously thought that Burgoyne's campaign depended on him, it wouldn't have been very difficult to make a detachment up the Hudson River to help him. Conversely, if Burgoyne had imagined that his success depended on what Howe was doing, one supposes he might have taken some steps to inform Howe of exactly where he intended to be and when, which he didn't.
Howe is...
Can you imagine the communication here? Now, I've said it throughout. Being a problem of something so important. I am so glad that we don't have a situation like that currently, any kind of parallel kind of thing going on, because this is what, 248 years, right? I mean, surely we've learned by looking back at history and what went wrong there. You know, we really amp up the communication skills of groups that go out to do stuff like, oh gosh, I don't know, something important, like let's pick something silly. Out of the blue, really no reference to anything at all. Like just say guarding a presidential candidate. Think about that. You'd have them in, like, say, oh, I don't know, they're going to a meeting or a special presentation or something like that, a gathering, maybe outside, something difficult. But you could pick a parameter and you'd secure it. Because nowadays we have communication, and I'm sure that all the groups that were there to do one job would have an ability to communicate back and forth without any kind of hindrance whatsoever, because we can look back at these things, history, and learn from that, because communication is important. So I'm glad that we are living in times of high-tech communication and skills and ability and training that would keep something awful, possible tragedy, from happening, because we have good communication skills. Just wanted to say I was glad we were in those kind of times.
Having troubles of his own. His advance toward Philadelphia is meeting with stubborn resistance from Washington and the main American army. Howe fights and wins a fierce battle at Brandywine Creek. Both sides suffer heavy losses.
Brandywine was bad.
Howe finally captures Philadelphia on September 26th.
Pretty name for an awful thing.
It is a hollow victory. Congress has fled.
Yep.
In European terms, the capital is the seat of government, the seat of the monarch, and the mere threat of the loss of the capital would bring a government to terms. The same thinking must have influenced Howe's constant feeling that he ought to get Philadelphia, that Philadelphia was somehow the capital, whatever that might mean in America, and that this would perhaps be a solution and lead to a political settlement. But on the Americans went.
They just left. We're over here now.
At Saratoga, Burgoyne is outnumbered 2-1, and the American forces continue to grow. He holds an urgent meeting with his generals. Baron von Riedesel and Simon Fraser urge him to retreat across the Hudson. Instead, Burgoyne orders another direct assault on the American army to force a passage to Albany.
Burgoyne was a gambler by temperament, loved gambling all his life. His temperament was not cautious. And as far as he was concerned, he was trying to execute a strategy which could work and which it was worth trying.
Give it the old try.
October 7th, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The British begin their attack.
Hey, sweetie.
At first, the American response is weak. General Gates refuses to leave his tent.
The minute Burgoyne showed up, Gates didn't know what to do. Gates's strength was as a paper shuffler. He could administer and work at a desk. He just was not a fighter. Once the battle began, he was worthless, literally, on the battlefield.
Not awful.
Seizing the initiative in the field and leading the counterattack is the most brilliant and fearless general of the American army, Benedict Arnold.
There he is, folks.
Arnold rides up and points his sword at the enemy. Morgan's men, urged on by Arnold, hurl themselves against the English and Germans with deadly fire from their rifles. I can't describe the bravery of Arnold on this battlefield. He's inspired with the fury of a demon.
3 years later, Arnold will become the Revolution's most famous traitor. But in 1777, at Freeman's Farm, he is its most heroic fighter. Arnold's horse is shot from under him. Seriously wounded, Arnold rallies his men to carry on the attack.
Arnold is a field general. was electric to the men. And when he was there, they would do things no one else could get them to perform. And here he broke the line, the last line that Burgoyne had. With that, Burgoyne had to start to retreat.
The British officers, ignoring their own personal danger, lead their troops in one last stand.
Very flawed character. Wonderful warrior.
General Fraser is hit.
There it
He was
goes.
shot by a rifleman hiding in a tree. Everyone, from Burgoyne to the lowliest private, is stunned. He's faint, and he's losing blood. He asked if our army is defeated. We told him no. He appeared for the moment, pleased.
About 3 in the afternoon, we are waiting for our dinner guests. Instead, they bring in General Fraser on a litter. They clear the table and use it as a bed for the general. The ball has gone through the general's bowels. All night I hear him lying there, groaning. All fatal ambition, and poor General Burgoyne, and my poor wife. He dies at 8 o'clock the next morning.
The supply of rebels is inexhaustible. It's like Hydra's head. When you cut one snake off, 7 more spring up in its place. For 3 weeks, no one has slept through the night. We are running low on rations. To keep spirits up, I have ordered the distribution of the last 12 barrels of rum.
October 10th, 2 in the afternoon. We take refuge in the cellar. My children lie on the earth with their heads on my lap. The sounds of the battle are growing louder, and I am sitting in the corner, trembling.
Her character.
I am more dead than alive. Not so
time.
much because of mine own danger, as from worrying about my husband. Of all the women whose husbands have been killed or wounded, shall I be the only fortunate one?
Her character shift.
We hear
over
this
time.
huge sound,
Wow.
like the howling of dogs. At first we think it's a trick of the enemies, so we send out a detachment to reconnoitre. They come back and report to us. It's wolves. One sets up a cry when it finds a corpse. Then the others join it in that hideous sound as they rip it apart. The howling gets louder and louder.
On October 17th, in a field near Saratoga, the British lay down their arms. Burgoyne's entire army is taken prisoner. Gone are all his dreams of easy victory, honor, and glory. A British officer would write that he felt as if he were looking at a new race of men.
I rode post-haste from Nantes with the dispatches from America. I didn't have time to get off my horse when Franklin shouted to me, "Did Howe really take Philadelphia?" "Yes, sir," I said. And the poor gentleman sadly shook his head and was heading back to the house. I stopped him. "But, sir, I have greater news than that. General Burgoyne and his whole army are prisoners of war." The effect was electrical.
We gotta win, folks.
This is
We
Franklin's
got our
moment
win.
of triumph. Saratoga has changed everything. He is finally received by the French court.
Catherine Green, your troubles will not last much longer. We have formed a treaty with the French. This alliance will serve to keep the English bull quiet and make him behave himself. His horns have been shortened. Benjamin Franklin.
There you go, Ben.
The Americans now have as their ally one of the great superpowers of the world. For the British, it is a different story.
Hey, Scott.
They now face the prospect of a world war.
From the point of view of the British government, that meant a real war. A real war against a real enemy, an enemy that spoke a foreign language, a dangerous enemy, an enemy that might invade, an enemy that might overthrow the kingdom. Not just troublesome political issues, not just expensive and complex colonial problems, but real serious mortal peril.
French were cool.
To learn more about the American Revolution, the people, the times, and the world as it was,
not the people,
visit
folks.
PBS Online at the
Just the
address
ones
on
that
your
sold
screen.
their soul. Not for
Tomorrow
rock and
night
roll
on
either.
Liberty, we were not created to be slaves.
Here we go.
The British exploit the South, but gain no real ground.
They couldn't hold territory, they couldn't cement loyalty, they couldn't restore the authority of the crown.
Out of this rabble rises a people who defy kings. While American and French troops make history at Yorktown.
There's no stopping us. In we go.
Freedom. Liberty. There you go, guys. Number 4 in the bag. So, a lot of characters you saw there. You have Benedict Arnold. We'll learn more about him. Very complex character. Wonderful general. Terrific leader. Right out front. Very much so. Follow me. Like, I'm the infantry. That kind of thing. Amazing things he pulled. We wouldn't have taken that one without him. And very close to General Washington, and breaks General Washington's heart, and almost sells out of country, without a doubt treason. There's only one punishment for that. And oddly enough, it's still in effect today, that law. So interesting to keep our eyes on both things. I think it's important to look back at history, try to see, hey, they were just like us. A lot of the things that they dreamed, that they fought for, that they believed in, that they wanted, that they cherished, very much like us. Number 1, freedom. You don't know how precious it is till you lose it. So they felt it. They felt it being pulled from them. So they decided to make a stand. Said no more. No more. Burgoyne, wonderful to see his character changing. The way, it's heartbreaking really to think about the people going in one way, having a belief, this is going to be easy. This is, and then there's another way to look at it militarily and strategically, and to look at the setup and, again, armchair quarterback, right? But to look back at it and think, why the hell did you take your ships all the way out there and get off there and then think you're going to hack it through the wilderness, dragging kids and 2,000 women and kids and dogs, cat, livestock, right? Horse-drawn carriages with these, wooden wheels trying to go through. Can you imagine going through these trees and, almost 9,000 men, an entourage, and then stopping at night in that mosquito-ridden swamp and drinking champagne and singing, music like he did. And, just slowly but surely people are dropping off. You got disease, you got attacks, you got starvation, all the things, snake bites, wolves, obviously. What a horrible thing. That reminded me so much of the hog pens being broken and running roughshod over the wounded and dead and dying in the wheat field in Gettysburg. Not that long ago. But these are the horrors we don't think of. We don't, becomes desensitized in a way to it, but it's become too easy to say, battle lasted 2 days, 3 days, 50,000 men, over and done with, long time ago. It meant something. It meant something. And I think the parallels are amazing. They blow my mind. And again, tonight it hit the French. And right now I'm just like, what are you doing? I see you. Like I said, not too many episodes ago, we see you. So many people have come into the light. It's so easy to see the darkness, isn't it? The shadows aren't quite as hidden anymore. It seems like the spell has been broken in some way where you can just see the things that are coming out. You go, okay, I see that. I remember the last time you did that. I can remember history. I can look back and I can see all the times. It's so clear. I can see the stuff that's happening now. There's a situation going on right now that if you don't realize how close it is to 11/22/63, I just can't imagine what you're thinking. Look at the overlaps on that. Look at all the stuff coming out. Look at how people, and be not deceived by the poisoning of the well. They tried this in 63. It's exactly what they did. Put out so much disinformation in so many different directions on so many levels. Give it to them, take it away. Give it to them, take it away. Throw this in, put this in. It's like that cake. Little rascals. Weep, wah, 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 wah. Weep, wah, 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 wah. Weep, wah, wah, wah. What happened at the end of that? After all the fun stuff, here, throw this in. Hit a rubber boot, remember? Had a hairbrush, a mirror. Here, throw this in. Spanky. Okay. Set on stove and stir. Remember all that? Darn thing exploded. And that's what happens when you keep jamming too many things in your cake. I, for one, am tired of people putting stuff in my cake I don't want. No, it's my cake. This is my piece of the pie over here. My square foot of real estate. Back off. Right? But it's so interesting to see all these different characters coming in with one realization and their culture and how they're trained and their reason for being there, whether you're a Hessian or a British general or, a New England farmer who grabbed a pitchfork, doesn't even have shoes, and they're just saying, I've had enough. Ask him. Stop on the corner. I wish they did a You Are There, where they go up and they get all the different reasons, like, some of the boys on the front line why they were there. What are you there for? Because I'm tired of being told by a king that I got no say in what I'm working for and where I can be and who can push me around in the streets and bother my wife or my kids or whatever. I want my kid to grow up safe. I want my wife to be able to go and trade her eggs for, maple syrup, whatever it is, sugar, flour, whatever, and not be hacked, to death by a raid of Native Americans, Indians, whatever, coming out of the woods, or British soldiers coming out of a dark alley. We're saying, I got to quarter him in my house. And now all our intimate conversations around the dinner table and my kids, my conversations with my wife and my kids and, my husband, whatever. I have some British soldiers sitting at the table I got to feed. This is invasive in so many levels, and it's rooted. And you can't really say that in this case, and again, just my opinion, but the Revolutionary War really wasn't a cut and dry evil, good versus evil thing here. It got ugly when people pushed and got pushed back. And the pockets of the characters of the people involved in those pockets and those little skirmishes and those little events, the Boston Massacre and all the fist fights and the windows that got broke and the people that got raided in their homes and killed, back and forth, both sides started in the cities, went out to the rural areas, got fed all kinds of different reasons for more fuel on the fire of, British generals being sent in to say, okay, let's get the southern colonies together. That should be easy. And they go in there and, certain pockets of towns and cities are very loyal. Like look at what happened when they went into New York. They threw a party. They said, this is great. Let's throw a party. And it was like an endless, celebration. There's so many loyalists there. I know in the Battle of Monmouth, that was one reason why everybody was criticizing George Washington and say, why didn't you chase him, to the ocean? You had him. Why didn't you chase him? Because he was going through a town that was almost 95% loyalists, and they would have been fought, and it was almost like they were getting their army, just backup, by an entire town. And George Washington hit the whole part of this. The beginning was George Washington is moving the army around, trying not to get it destroyed until Congress and everybody got their crap together, and he could have enough gunpowder to actually have a good fight. And he only did it when he absolutely had to. And a couple of times he won those by deception and by clear luck. But you got to say the dude had chutzpah. When and they were trapped up there in the Brooklyn Heights, back to the water. Hey, boys, y'all, everybody keep your campfires going. And we're going to slowly sneak the hell up out of here. Get very quiet, pass the word. Get in the canoes. Start paddling slow and quiet. The last boat out of there had Washington on it. And I often wonder when I hear that story or I think about it, the cheekiness of it. The whole Mel Gibson last, he's on the helicopter and that boot doesn't come off till the last man's off, and we were soldiers. Those moments that you hope are true, but we'll never know that exact look when, they locked eyes and they realized it. Did he do a little wave? Bye. Do-do-do. What would it have been like? Did he give a thumbs up? Did he give the old Jersey salute? Did he throw up the middle finger? No, I don't think he did any of that. I think he just sat there and just kept further and further till he disappeared into the mist. At the shot, you wonder why people do these things. Why did Meade let General Lee go after Gettysburg? But was it adopting that whole thing of let him up easy? Like Lincoln said, let him up easy, boys. They're Americans. It's rough, being on the same soil, trying to sort it all. But this one isn't easy. It's not good versus evil. Like I said, the evil is easy to see, and you can see it on both sides, because these times war really brings out the best and the worst in people. And right now we're still sorting who's who, because we just had Benedict Arnold in Saratoga save the day. A hero, a warrior. And that same man, for some reason, in the pressure of the times and the culture and the day, his own needs, his own wants, his own expectations, his own thought of what he was due, how he took the whole, I'm not being respected, I'm not getting enough, I thought there'd be more. That is such a deep conversation and it's such a deep observation of the relationship between him, Benedict Arnold, and George Washington. It's portrayed very well in Turn. It's also, it's done very well in Turn. I would have to just leave it there. It's in other movies and series as well, because there's so many of them. But that's a pretty good portrayal, I would say, from what I know, and I'm no expert. So the thing is it broke Washington's heart. He could not understand it. And Washington was very dismissive of things like other people complaining about, I'm not getting paid. None of us are getting paid. Can we go back to the maps? We got something we got to do here, where other people had their own vantage point of what that meant to them. They have kids they were paying for. Do they have, what was their situation? Not unlike us. Everybody right now is reacting to our times, the way it affects us. And some of us might be a little bit, willing to go deeper if you're an empath or someone like that. Not a common characteristic in most light workers, but you tend to look at the whole thing, how it affects everybody, because that affects you. And I'm sure you can see what's going on now. And like I said before, it seems like the spells aren't quite as working as well. And you can see all this different stuff is just clear as day, But when they put it in your face like they did during the Olympics or the Oscars or God, it's in everything. It's in every Disney movie. It's look what they did to Star Wars. It's Harley Davidson and their cakes and their celebrations and their rainbows and all that other stuff. Now they're trying to take hearts and turn it into something different. This is all played out in history so many times. Stand back and look at the layers. Look back at how other people got through it and derive hope, inspiration. You know what I mean? Get propelled forward a little bit. Help you sort and discern what you need to do. Because every individual is going to be going through something different. Pressure's all the same. It's all coming from different directions, but people have different working situations, home life, and different things like that. It's all going to shift a little bit. But sit back and look and say, hey, if I was this guy, if I was Benedict Arnold, would I have held out a little longer? Was it really about the money? Was it about the notoriety? Would I be willing to do something that he did because all of these other things meant so much to me? Are other people doing things because maybe they're being blackmailed or they're in a situation, or are they truly evil? Well, at this point, you ought to be able to smell them by now. They smell like sulfur. And their shadows are coming out of the darkness, and you can see them more. Don't be afraid of that. You know what gets them. It's the light. You are the light. There's a lot of people in this story in Liberty that had a light. A lot of them burned bright really, really fast and got put out. And some of them just burned and kind of dimmed out at the end. Perfect example of that would be Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. Do you know that 50 years exactly to the day, on July 4th, John Adams passed in his bed with his family around him, and his last words were, Jefferson survives. He had no idea, nor did anybody around him know that 5 hours earlier, Thomas Jefferson had passed very much in the same way in his bed with his family around him. Things happen, folks. But stop and think during the craziest stuff. You're in your car, you're listening to things, and you're hearing stuff. You go, listen, I'm going to take all this information and I'll put it all on the table like I'm doing a mystery solve. Solve the mystery. And you got all the index cards and the samples of evidence and things like that, and go, I'm not going to throw that crazy stuff out yet. I'm going to put it right here because I don't know if I need it yet. Because I look back at history and it tells me that's what I need to do because I've seen this game before. And I know what happens when they poison the well. They take something good and then they add some lie to it. I saw them do this in 11, 22, 63, and they've been doing it for years. And I've seen big people argue and sit in rooms, and they all have a piece of information, and they're just so caught up in, I have to prove my point, that they can't realize they all have a piece of the puzzle. Put it on the table, back up, talk about it, have a conversation. Because it's happening again, and people are getting off in all these little groups, just like they do with Bigfoot people and UFO people and ghost people and, ghosts or demons people and yada, yada, yada. And everybody's fighting, and everybody doesn't realize you got a piece of the freaking puzzle in your hand. And you're not wrong. You're not all wrong, and you're not all right. If we all get together and put your evidence on the table, we can sort this mess. We know what their game is. We've seen them do it before. Some ain't right. But we know the way out of this dark hole. We've been in it before, and we know the way out. Being together and focusing on the similarities rather than the differences is always the way out. Light beats dark. Love is eternal. And you are the light. I love you all. I hope you got some happiness out of this series so far. The next one, of course, is episode 5, and we are moving right along through the Revolutionary War. This is going to get into a little bit of the things people can't seem to get through or pass, like the hypocrisy of it all. Yes, you could yearn to be free. You could fight to be free. You could fight to be free with bloody feet, no shoes, in the snow, with a pitchfork, and still go home and to a farm that might have slaves, or you might own slaves, or you just push Native Americans off their soil, and now you're fighting for that soil, and you're saying it's mine. There's a lot of hypocrisy going on here, but there's a lot of sorting, and there's a lot of people trying to understand how to grow together, still get what they need and what they want, and not kill each other. And that's the hard part, because sometimes people want too much, and the people that want very little will take and push and get pushed and get pushed and get pushed until they push back. And sometimes you have to push back in a peaceful way and do it with your dollar. Say, I'm just not giving you any more money. I'm not going to your stupid movie. I'm not going to buy your stupid product. I'm not going to ride your stupid motorcycle if you're going to put that money towards doing that to innocent people that can't decide things yet. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just understand that I think my sister was 5 when she thought she was Superman, and she would move past that. She tied a towel around her neck and jumped off the roof. Kids can't make decisions like that. We all know these things. It's up to us to protect them from those things. That's what parents do. That's what loving people do. And they guide. First, do no harm. Right? These are just my opinions. And if you disagree with it, I'll stand by your right to disagree with it. Just don't put it in my square foot of real estate. Be peaceful. Go over there. And don't get any of your ick on other people who may not be able to fight you off. Because people should band together against a bully. The whole school shouldn't be suffering the ignorance of one. My thoughts. Because every time those kids all got together and they found out that together they were so much stronger than just one. A good movie that talks about that is something called The Straight Story. And it's really good. It's about a guy who's not taking no for an answer, and has to go see his brother before he passes, and he doesn't have a car, so he rides a riding lawnmower across country to go see his brother, and all the things that happened to him along the way. And he tells a little story. He's trying to help a runaway and tell him to go back to the family because you're stronger with family and stronger together. And he picks up a stick and he snaps it, and he shows it to her. He goes, "See how fragile we can be?" And he picks up a bunch of other sticks and he puts them all together and he tries to break them, and it's harder. He can't break them because it's all together. He says that's what family's like. If you can't hang with your bloodline family, find your tribe. Get together with somebody you can trust, you can talk to. You can always come here, and we'll be here tomorrow night. Keep the lights on. And if you need to regenerate a little bit, I suggest you take your shoes off. Dance some of those blues away. I love y'all. Thanks for being here for Liberty. Please go to TeePublic. Maybe get you a button or some stickers. We've got some great Sage Against the Machine stickers there with Crispy and some other stuff. We'll be here tomorrow night with Steve. I don't know what we're talking about yet, but we'll think of something. And I really appreciate you guys doing this. And I hope it's been not just a distraction and something fun to do. I think we can really get a lot from this. And it's really inspired me. I hope it's inspired you, and I hope it's given you some strength. Even if it's just looking back and saying, man, if these people did it up against these odds, by God, I can. I hope that happened for some of y'all. Get some inspiration from it. Also, looking back and going how precious real history really is. So all of this is going into a playlist. All of the little shorts, all of the little extra videos and things like that are all going into a playlist. So please take that playlist and sit with a kid. Do a summer thing of your own. Put a sheet up on the back of the house and show it as a picnic, drive-in, something or other when the grandkids come over. But for the love of Pete, show it to them. Tell them history, because they're not teaching it in school. And if we don't give them that foundation, knowing how precious freedom is, whether you're Braveheart screaming it or, somebody that's got out of their chains and running for their life, the back swamp. Freedom is a beautiful word. It's worth fighting for. You got to want it. Dance that blues away, babies. Thanks for being here. See you tomorrow night. Thanks for being here. Hit the like. Thank you.